I'd like to welcome the Minister to the House as well. And I always seem to, well, I generally follow Senator Barrett in these debates, as in I speak after him. And I always tend to start with something picking up on Senator Barrett, and I apologise if I, but there is an element which causes potholes where I live anyway, and it's the weather, more so than vehicles, I have to say. You know, and like we're now in the last week almost of March, and every day this week all of us looked out at snow. It's quite unprecedented in this country. So whilst I respect that the laden weight issue you will deal with later on, I'd like to welcome you, Minister, to the House, and I suppose this is a piece of housekeeping duties that you have to do, following on from the budget, and we have to implement this legislation today. I am a little bit amused at this pot of gold that Fianna Fáil have identified continuously in this House with regard to not dealing with the legislation we have in front of us, opposing it, so that we can go off and find a pot of gold. Nobody ever found a pot of gold, to the best of my knowledge, either in this country, even though we had loads of fairies. But if it is there somewhere, please tell us where it is, because I would love if we could go somewhere today, find all this money, not have to implement legislation like we're doing today, and solve the problems which were generated by the said party that I've just mentioned. I'd like to, Minister, start on a positive note by welcoming the situation now where the motor vehicles are going to be taxed or registered rather on a biannual basis. The motor industry has sought this for many years to deal with what happens in the industry, where everybody was basically trying to get the car as early on in January as possible so that they would get the best value out of the year. It's a little bit like planning an underage hurling team. If you could have them all born the last day of the year or the first day of the new year, it makes a big difference as to when they can play. So this is something very similar to that. And I think that this will help the industry in a lot of ways. And I welcome the fact that we are doing this. Currently, 80% of new car sales take place in the first quarter. So we will now see a massive difference in that, and I think it will even out the whole situation for the motor industry. Could I query the rise in the VRT, which will increase the price of new cars and subsequently used cars? You might like to comment on that. I'd also like to query, Minister, and I welcome the changes in the bands, and I have them here in front of me, but for some reason the G band was not touched at all this year. Now, as I understand it, and we know it's not based on CC, obviously it's based on emissions, but you would be looking at bigger cars in this instance, and generally speaking, people with bigger cars, and reference was made to some of the ones out in the car parking lot out here. There's quite a number of big cars out there. Generally speaking, the people with bigger cars would have more money, and you would imagine that you could take some little bit more off of them instead of what you've done. What has been done in this is that there's zero increase or zero difference in the G band. So you might like to answer that. Another issue which is brought to my attention by a number of people this week, and which I've also myself had a concern about for many years, and that's the whole issue, Minister, of people now are cash strapped, and they're in a lot of cases only able to tax their car on a quarterly basis. The differential between taxing the car on a quarterly or on an annual basis, Senator Barrett, who is the statistician here, will be interested. It's 12.5% on a small car, which I did the figures on a Deo Matiz. That's a substantial amount of money for anybody who can't afford to go beyond the 3-month tax period. It's $199 annually. It works out at $224 if you do it on a quarterly basis. So you might like to comment, can we do something to make that more fair? If not today, or if not in this legislation, something else, something that you might look at down the road. Another issue, Minister, that I'd like to raise is the whole issue of the local government fund, which is obviously affected by this. And as you said in your own presentation, it will go down now from 1.1 billion to 960 million. there is a critical point below which the local government fund cannot go, because local government, and Senator Keane, who's a practitioner in local government, and myself, and indeed Senator Hart on the other side of me here, will be very much aware that it has been, at this stage, everything that can be adjusted downwards has been done. So I would ask you to take that into account in relation to this particular issue of local government funding going forward. And that leads me on to the next item that I want to raise with you, and that is, we saw this week in the media in Cork, where 3 employees of Cork County Council were suspended because the weather-prone roads, which were potholed on a certain part in Carrigaline, they were coming back from doing potholing work, and they saw a big pothole, and like any good employee would do, they stopped to fill it. And as you know, there was a safety inspector travelling behind them, and now the 3 said gentlemen have been suspended. So what I want to ask you in relation to this, and I'm not commenting, I fully appreciate that there has to be health and safety done, and it has to be paramount. There have been deaths on Irish roads of employees of local authorities. But again, the research I have done, safety auditing on any individual piece of roadwork can cost up to 8% of the cost of the work. Now that's a substantial amount of money, and I checked with our own engineers this week. For 1 year's work in my own electoral area of where I was a councillor, it required 1 qualified employee to spend 1 full week going out surveying sites and doing the audit on the pieces of work. And the amount of red tape that is there now to deal with this whole issue of safety audits, you cannot do anything now without 8% or more of the money coming out for safety audit. Surely there is a savings there, and we need to look at the legislation that has brought us to the level now where literally you can't fill a pothole without doing a safety audit. This is what has resulted from this week.
I'm going to have to stall you there.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. I'll just finish on this. Minister, I'd like you to look at that. And again, it's not something directly related to this, but the local government fund is being trimmed to the last. And we have to look at where is the money being spent. Are we over-legislated in this particular area? I'll ask you that, and you might respond.
Thank you very much. Now,